President, I rise today to share my concerns about the tax increases called for in the health care reform bill that is now being finalized behind closed doors. I can almost see them. I want to make sure the American people truly understand that these tax increases what they will mean for them and their families. This bill calls for an incredible and shocking $500 billion in taxes, and massive new taxes. Taxes that will fall on the average American who already knows that their tax burden is too high. Now, we hear a lot about the efforts behind the closed doors to merge three different bills and all the costs and all the efforts to get more voters on board. But we don't really hear much about the tax increases, and they really should make the taxpayer sit up and take notice. The behind-the-doors crowd have tried to disguise some of the new taxes in this bill by presenting them as being paid for by targeted healthcare industries. However, the reality is that the average Americans who purchase health insurance and use medical services from prescription drugs to hearing aids are the ones that will foot the bill for this tax and this spending spree. The higher taxes called for in this bill will come straight out of Americans' pocketbooks. Now, Americans have taxpayers, and Americans have the right to know, they have the right to be informed, and they have the right to understand, and they have the right to be heard. Not only on the spending, not only on the health care reform bill, but in regards to the taxes that they will pay. Let me give you just a few examples of the new taxes called for and who will actually pay them. The bill imposes a 40% excise tax on health insurance providers that offer high-cost health insurance plans. This provision is the largest tax hike in the bill. It raises $201 billion. Of this amount, an analysis by the Joint Committee on Taxation, or the JCT, finds that more than 80% of the $164 billion of the tax will come from increased income and payroll taxes on higher wages. When the bill is implemented, however, the excise tax is likely to hit 40% of American families. So the reality is that these families, not the insurance provider, will be on the hook for the $164 billion. The bill raises taxes on those who pay for their health care out of pocket by raising the floor for deducting catastrophic medical expenses from 7.5% to 10% of adjusted gross income. Now, those who take this deduction are most often seniors and those with serious medical issues. 87% of taxpayers who claim this deduction have income under $100,000. Now, while an amendment to exempt taxpayers 65 or older from the higher threshold was approved in committee, thank goodness, but don't be fooled, the exemption is only in effect in the first 3 years. As a result, in the following years, roughly 50% of the taxpayers affected by this proposal will be over the age of 65. This makes no sense. The bill raises taxes on the more 35 million Americans who participate in flexible spending accounts. The median income of a flexible spending account participant is $55,000. Now, this program is a very important benefit for many families for whom health insurance does not cover or does not sufficiently cover some of the highest cost health care expenses such as dental, vision, and also prescription drug costs. They are also important for individuals who manage chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, or cancer. The FSAs allow participants to set aside money out of their own pockets to pay for these necessary expenses. However, under this bill, the government caps how much can be set aside in a flexible spending account, a person's own account, effectively raising the tax burden on certain FSA participants and increasing their health care costs, typical of a disguised tax in this bill. Another tax attack. It also eliminates the ability of individuals to use money from their accounts, the FSA accounts, to purchase over-the-counter medications. Here we are trying to put downward pressure on health care costs rather than maintaining current law that gives consumers the option to purchase over-the-counter medications through a flexible spending account that they have chosen to put money into. The bill instead directs them to more costly alternatives and increased use of the health care system and limits the consumer's ability to fully use their own accounts. Another example of the stealth taxes called for in this bill is the individual mandate penalty. Although the President has said this penalty is not a tax, the Finance Committee bill adds this provision under a section called the excise tax, tax on individuals without essential health benefits coverage. Now, the government expects to collect $20 billion from this tax. In 2013, almost half of those Americans who will be paying the penalty will have incomes between $22,000 and $68,000 for a family of four. This penalty essentially means that the IRS will now tax you if you don't buy a health care plan approved by the government. Let me repeat that. This penalty essentially means that the IRS will now tax you if you don't buy a health care plan approved by the government. Now, this bill also expands the reach of the IRS even further into the lives of ordinary Americans, allowing them to collect more information than ever before about you and your health care choices in order to tax you based on these choices. This provision highlights one of the most disturbing aspects of this bill, the increased role, Mr. President, that the IRS will play in the lives and health care choices of every American. Under this bill, the IRS will gain unprecedented new powers. But here's the clincher. Here's the clincher. Sit up straight on your chairs. There's no money in this bill to pay for the expansion of the IRS that will have to occur for the IRS to implement, administrate, and enforce these new tax provisions. Emphasis on enforce. How much will that cost? How many billions will be needed to pay for this growth in government? How many more tax cops will the IRS have to hire? We don't know. But make no mistake, every American should understand that the IRS will be playing a bigger role in their life and their health care decisions. Question for all those who brave the town hall meetings, mostly over here, not over there. Everyone who wants more IRS involvement in their lives, raise your hand. I don't think in those town hall meetings you'll hear many hands clapping. Now, not only will Americans face massive new taxes under this bill, they will also see an unprecedented expansion of the Internal Revenue Service and a further reach by government into their lives. This is the wrong solution to health care reform. Americans are looking for real reform that preserves their health care choices, but reform that comes with a $500 billion tax increase and supervised, if not more, by the Internal Revenue Service is simply not the answer. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back the balance of my time.